Hey everyone, it's time to Nerfs and chill. In this video, I'm going to break down all 5 weeks of the public test server patch notes for the Update 34 launch of the High Owl chapter in regards to classes. Your favorite classes, maybe your least favorite classes, Dragonknight, Necromancer, Nightblade, Sorcerer, Templar, and Warden. We're going to look at the buffs, we're going to look at the fixes, we're going to look at the adjustments, and we're going to look, of course, at the nerfs. And we'll start with the Dragonknight, which has actually received a fair amount of changes. Both for the better or for the worse, depending on your perspective. So first thing that was touched with the Dragonknight was Engulfing Flames morph. The damage was not really touched, however, the flame damage taken bonus on the morph was nerfed from 10% to 6% on a target. However, the total sum of weapon spell damage needed to reach the 6% cap is pretty much the same as a 10% cap. So they're trying to encourage tanks not using it while at the same time making it so that maybe, you know, it's not as strong as it was before. Burning Embers morph. It was reduced in terms of the healing value from 100% down to about 50%. Probably a PvP-centric change. And for the Combustion passive, which is one of the main passives for the Sustained Dragonknight, which recently saw to a couple buffs within the past 5 or so patches. This passive now has a cooldown of 3 seconds, up from every half a second. So what this basically means is, for a lot of, or not a lot, but for certain scenarios or for certain skills where you're using certain spammables like talents, you're gonna see probably a very noticeable difference between the sustain on your Dragonknight from a pre-update 34 to post-update 34. However, I've also tested this not just on the metric dummy metrics, where synergies aren't as prevalent as in raid scenarios. I've asked people, hey, how do your Dragonknights feel in raid on PTS? And they've said it's fine. It's pretty much fine for the most part. Obviously, again, it kind of goes back to certain skills maybe not being as heavily spammed, or things like certain situations, like maybe you're solo Dragonknight in some, dungeons, like doing vet dungeons and stuff like that. You probably notice it, but for the most part, in the raiding context of PvE, doesn't seem as detrimental as it does on paper, at least from my perspective. For PvP, and of course, this has been largely received well, because in PvP, Dragonknight has been very, very good as a class as of late. Too good, in fact, as some may argue. Anyway, let's move on. The Choking Talons morph. They did reduce the cost of Choking Talons from 4,050 down to 3,510 magicka. The Coagulating Blood morph. This morph no longer reduces in cost, but instead increases the healing bonus based on your missing health to 50%, up from 33%. So while the sustain took a hit, the healing bonus did get buffed. However, the healing bonus is now a true value rather than an additive value. So we'll see if it's going to pan out in the end. They also did reduce the base healing of Coagulating Blood by about 3% to fix some back-end calculation errors. Hardened Armor morph. They increased the damage shield size granted from Hardened Armor by basically 24-25%. And we'll see how this also pans out, honestly. I'm not exactly sure in what instances Hardened Armor may be useful, but we'll see. Strictly speaking from a PvE context, I can see it being useful in specific dungeons and stuff like that, but we'll see. But it's still a buff, so why not? Fragmented Shield morph. They increased the duration of Major Mending granted from this morph to 6.667 seconds, which is weird because it was 5 seconds. However, it's okay because it will actually be a whole number when you have your Eternal Mountain passive maxed out. So it will end up being like a whole integer. Next, we have the Necromancer. Mystic Siphon morph. This morph now increases your health, magic, and stamina recovery by up to 150 while it is active, rather than restoring up to 1260 magicka over its duration. This is sort of a buff. It technically is a buff across the board, at least as far as sustain is concerned, potentially even healing, particularly in PvP. For PvE, I think it's pretty much going to be a better return on your resources, especially when you're using a mix of stamina and magical skills, but also the fact that the magic recovery is 150, rivaling almost coming close basically to the worm set. I mean, I think it's definitely a strong buff. However, on the other hand, Mortal Coil Morph, instead of doing the exact same thing, which they changed on the PTS, Mortal Coil now restores up to 1,020 magic and stamina over its duration, with its restore happening in increments of 2 seconds, so it's every 2 seconds, rather than granting 150 health, magic, and stamina recovery while it's active. So, one is clearly more for recovery stats, while the other is more for resource stats. Okay, so Beckoning Armor Morph is now going to pull targets once every 2 seconds, up from once every 3 seconds. So this is a slight buff for necro tanking. Ruinous Scythe, the morph, the stamina morph of Scythe. This morph now deals bleed damage rather than physical damage, which is interesting. This morph now applies the hemorrhaging status effect on damage dealt, which is very good. Also, this morph now sets all enemies off balance on hit, rather than every third cast, so they buff the heck out of the skill. We've been trying to see if there's an application to be had here, at least within a group setting where maybe a Necromancer can cast Ruinous Scythe on trash, and to guarantee that off balance, and people can take advantage of the new off balance CP. But that again still remains to be seen in terms of testing. The Hexproof morph for the Necromancer, they reduced the cost of this morph to 1,670, down from 1,880 in its final level. The morph tooltip now properly states it reduces in cost as the ability ranks up, so just a free kind of sustained cost given. Next, we'll talk about the Nightblade. Now, Nightblade actually got another good amount of changes or fixes. And first, we'll start with Refreshing Path. So there was an issue where the minor endurance and intellect granted from Refreshing Path only applied to the caster. But now, it's going to apply to everybody that it touches. So that's pretty cool. It's basically the Warden fungal growth morph, where it gives you minor endurance and intellect. But now they've given it to Nightblades as well. So that's pretty cool. And of course, I think Refreshing Path being a stationary AoE and a very wide AoE at that is going to be very easy to hit on your group members. The morph also grants minor endurance and intellect for 4 seconds each tick. So what this means is if someone does step out of that Refreshing Path before the duration is up, they'll still have 4 seconds of minor endurance and intellect available. So in some ways it's as good as the fungal growth for Wardens, in other ways it's not as good. So Piercing Mark morph for the Nightblade fixed an issue where the heal from this morph was lower than the base ability. They increased the duration of the Piercing Mark effect up to 60 seconds, up from 30 seconds. So they just slapped on another 30 seconds to the duration of Piercing Mark, which is interesting. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. The Ambush morph has also been buffed for Nightblade. They increased the duration of Empower granted from this morph to 10 seconds, up from 3 seconds just for yourself. And this morph also now grants Minor Berserk for its duration, which is pretty funny because they did remove Minor Berserk from Merciless Resolve back in the day. So this is gonna be pretty interesting to see if people will try to use Ambush in PvE content. Yeah. Surprise Attack morph fixed an issue where this morph had no upgrades as it ranked up. Now it will deal 1.1% more damage per rank, meaning that's 4.4% more of a damage gain on Surprise Attack for Update 34. Drain Power, just the base skill, it's not a morph of anything. Increase the duration of Major Brutality and Sorcery granted from this ability, and its morphs to 30 seconds, up from 20 seconds. But Power Extraction, the morph of Drain Power, now also grants the caster Minor Courage for 30 seconds upon dealing damage. So pretty interesting morph addition here, and we'll see if more people use this morph. And again, Power Extraction also does give you, I believe, the Minor Cowardice effect. So yeah, it's gonna be, I guess, as good in some sense as Sap Essence. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Soul Shred, the ultimate, they fixed an issue where this ability and its morphs could ignore line of sight in some cases. On a side note, that is going to be a huge thing with Update 34. A lot of abilities or AoEs that, could go through walls and stuff like that will now, or should, no longer ignore those walls. I'm kind of curious if that also applied to NPCs as well. And they also fixed numerous issues where the damage or healing from Soul Shred and its morphs could also use the wrong stats to scale. So maybe you'll hit harder now, or maybe you'll heal for more, depending on the morph you're picking. Next, and of course, not the least, Sorcerer. They did kind of buff Crystal Fragments here. The morph now activates off of any non-ultimate active ability cast, rather than only magic costing abilities. So, wow. Okay, so I think Sorcerer is definitely going to be the top, or one of the top single target DPS classes next patch. Even AoE wise, I think it could be a top contender against Necromancer and Dragonknights. Not because of this change alone, but because of what I'm going to be talking about here with the class. But anyway, reduced the proc chains to 33%, however, down from 35%. Well, that's whatever, because 2%, I mean, it's like kind of insignificant, so I'm not exactly sure why they did that, but I'm sure they were trying to kind of compensate for the fact that now it can, Crystal Frag proc can activate off of anything outside of light attack and heavy attacking. So that's pretty interesting. For the Crystal Weapon morph, which is a stand morph, this morph now causes your next 2 light or heavy attacks to deal bonus damage up from 1. There's a small cooldown on this, basically, to avoid the ability to instantly proc both aspects of this skill. And also, they've increased the base cost of Crystal Weapon significantly from 2,295 stamina to 3,443. To basically say, hey, you're getting basically, 2 free damage boosts in a row. So we're going to give you more, we're going to have you pay a higher tax on your resources. But anyway, they also increased the duration of the skill Crystal Weapon from 4 to 6 seconds to basically kind of be like, okay, well, we know not everybody can light attack fast, or maybe there's something else you want to do with heavy attacking. So we'll see. From initial testing, this morph seems pretty busted, but we'll see if they will nerf this down the line. Summon Charged Atronach morph. This morph's AoE damage now always applies a concuss status effect. Another buff there. Boundless Storm, they fixed an issue where the visual effects were just not in sync with combat effects, so that's kind of whatever. The Endless Fury morph, it reduced the cost of the morph of Endless Fury down to 2,160, down from 2,430, which should somewhat help with Sorc Sustain for update 34. Energy Overload morph. This morph now restores up to 1,200 magicka and stamina rather than up to the weird number of 1,192 magicka. What's significant here, though, is not the amount, but the fact that not only will it restore your magicka per hit, it will now also restore your stamina per hit. So this is pretty cool. But another significant thing about the Energy Overload morph is that this resource return for your magic and stamina in 1,200 set amounts per light attack and heavy attack is any time you use a light or heavy attack. That's right. You can just light attack or heavy attack with overload turned on the air particles, and then you get your resources back. You don't have to deal damage to get resources back. So that's pretty interesting, the way they're going with this. I can see this kind of being useful for people who, maybe in PvP when you're running away from people, and you need maybe a bit more magicka or something, or stamina to roll dodge or streak one more time from the group chasing you down, but you can't turn your camera around and then light attack them because that'll slow you down as you walk backwards. So, you could light attack the air running away and getting stamina magicka. So pretty interesting. We'll see how this goes as well. Surge, they fixed an issue with Surge where the major sorcery granted from this ability was not ranking up in duration. But yeah, that was Sorcerer. Let's move on to Templar here. Everybody's favorite class, right? The Blazing Shield morph increased the radius of this morph to 8 meters, up from 6. And so that's not too big of a radius buff, but again, it will probably be noticeable depending on the scenario. The Backlash increased the cost of this ability in the Purifying Light morph to 2,160 from 2,000. Oh man, Templar, the sustain is probably not very good anymore on Templar compared to some of the other classes nowadays. So I'm not exactly sure why they're increasing the cost of this right now. Maybe they're seeing something in PvP, they're like, okay, maybe it's a bit too much. However, again, Power to Light morph, they reduced the cost though, because it is stamina costing, down from 1,700 to 1,337, whereas Backlash is magicka cost. Not exactly sure what the reasoning for this is. The Living Dark morph. So this was the Living Dark morph was nerfed due to the, I guess, the high performance of it, or the overperformance of it in PvP. So basically the morph's heal no longer scales with stats, and instead heals for a base amount of 2,000 health when it triggers. And they did increase, however, the duration of this from 4 seconds to 10 seconds, so that's 2,000 health pretty much for a duration of 10 seconds. But they also did reduce the cost slightly from of Living Dark from 4,320 down to about 4,050. Overall, though, it definitely has taken a hit, especially for Templar PvPers, so we'll see how this goes. The Dark Player morph reduced the cost of this morph down to 2,430, down from about 2,700. I don't really know anyone who's like super invested into using Dark Player in PvE settings. I'm not sure about PvP because I haven't PvP'd in so long, but in PvE, I guess like they want us to sort of use. I mean, because it does have the same channel time as frags now, 0.8 seconds, so it is a little easier to weave. But again, I don't know what the reducing of this cost will do for the popularity or the usage of the skill. I feel like they could do a better service to Templar to make it where sweeps or jabs is a 0.8 second channel rather than the awkward channel it is now, or something like that. A really interesting change to Templar as well. Practiced Incantation. That is one of the morphs, or the other morph of Remembrance. For your, when the Templar kind of goes into heal mode and staying still, they can't move. They also get major protection on Remembrance. But for the Practice Incantation morph, this morph now allows you to move while channeling. So that's going to be pretty interesting for PvP, or maybe even some cases of PvE. So we'll see. Lastly, and not of course least, is the Warden class. Again, a handful amount of changes here. I think pretty much it's all buffs here. But the Wild Guardian morph now deals 10% more damage, up from 5%. The morph now converts the damage to bleed damage instead of physical, and each attack of the bear applies the hemorrhaging status effect. Interesting. The Deep Fissure morph now also applies minor breach to enemies hit for a duration, so the shocks. Corrupting Pollen morph, this is really huge, and I've been using it for the new trial, Dreadsail Reef, for a hard mode. The morph now also applies minor cowardice to enemies in the area to help it gain some viability in PvE areas. So I think this is going to be the go-to morph. I mean, that's just free minor cowardice. That's basically an entire 5-piece set of mending on trash, on bosses, on anything that's inside of that AoE. Plus, that stacks with your infused weakening or something like that, or other forms of mitigation and damage reduction debuffs on bosses and stuff like that. So, very important skill and morph change to keep an eye on, because people have been asking me, why are you using Corrupting Pollen in PvE? I've been answering, well, because they changed it. Next, the Arctic Blast morph. The morph now requires enemies to be damaged 5 times in order to be stunned, up from 3. This has not been a very popular change amongst Warden enjoyers. However, I think they did a dev explanation for this, where they just kind of wanted the I guess like people to, I don't know, like counterplay Warden, but I feel like in PvP, Wardens are already counterplayable. It's really predictable what they're going to do next. So I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning is here for that one. They reduced the duration of the stun of Arctic Blast to 3 seconds, down from 4, not very significant. But they did increase the duration of the stat counter to 3 seconds, up from 1. So this, yeah, I don't know. Again, a very unpopular change amongst the Warden players, but yeah, we'll see how this goes too. I feel like I've been saying that a lot throughout this entire video. Crystallized Slab morph. This morph now also stuns the target upon dealing damage. This has been kind of contentious as well, because Wardens feel like they are losing the ability to control when, I guess, they want to stun people, but I guess they would have to cast this in order to stun people if they do work off of a Crystallized Slab, since they are losing out on some power from Arctic Blast being changed. Expansive Frostcloak morph, and I have a theory about this one. They expanded the Expansive Frostcloak's radius of the morph to 36 meters, up from 28 meters. I have a theory as to why this happened. I think a lot of people will think instantly, oh, that's PvP or something. I think it's the new trial, because the new trial is really big. and 36 meters makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like, especially within the context of looking at the new trial, or maybe it's a mix of both PvP and the new trial, where they buffed the heck out of the size of this thing, the size radius of the application of major resolve, or maybe they just want to make it easier on newer players. I don't know, but it's certainly a buff for sure. I mean, just one button and 36 meters away, your tank or whoever is getting major resolve. Northern Storm, lastly, the last skill for the Warden I'm going to be reviewing. The morph of Northern Storm is now going to grant 300 weapon and spell damage for up to 30 seconds after casting, rather than up to 15% max magicka for 30 seconds. I really do like this morph idea, simply because 15% max magicka. Max stats haven't really been like the greatest thing ever since, it became more and more important for you to stack weapon and spell damage. I can see some people missing out, missing that 15% extra max magicka, but at the same time, I think this does give a bit more of an offensive capability, especially to maybe like PvP wardens, or even people who just want to use this ultimate in PvE. So yeah, we'll see. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks so much for Nerfs and chilling with me. Let me know what you guys think about these class changes down below in the comments. Are you guys excited about these class changes? Do you guys feel like some changes were unfair? Let me know. I'm really curious. But until then, stay safe, have fun, and see you guys next time.